Hi, it's Katrina. Has another ancient computer been found? Did aliens land in India thousands of years ago? And who really discovered America first? In today's video, I'll be exploring the hard questions and crazy discoveries that scientists can't explain. Egyptian scarab or spaceship? There's some debate going on whether this ancient Egyptian seal depicts a scarab or a spaceship. The whole story is so out of this world, you're not going to believe it. It involves a volcano, a very old pharaoh, and an uncanny resemblance to the Millennium Falcon. In Israel, a man was hiking on an extinct volcano in Lower Galilee when he came across an Egyptian seal from 3,500 years ago. It had been discarded on the horns of Hatim, the volcano named after its two peaks that look sort of like horns. The only reason the hiker found the seal was that it had rained heavily before his hike, dislodging the artifact from where it had been buried for so long. The seal was identified by Dr. Daphna Ben-Tor, an expert in ancient Egypt who works at the Israel Museum. He identified it as an amulet from the days of the New Kingdom, which began in the 16th century BC. The doctor was able to give a more specific date once he realized that Pharaoh Thutmose III is the one depicted on the amulet. Thutmose III ruled Egypt from 1481 to 1425 BC. His name is inscribed in tiny hieroglyphics on the seal, making it very easy to date. Thutmose ruled with his stepmother/aunt Hatshepsut for the first 22 years of his reign. Only after Hatshepsut's death did he become the undisputed pharaoh. Some historians call Thutmose the Napoleon of Egypt because under his iron fist, he created the biggest empire Egypt had ever seen. Thutmose captured 350 cities during his 54 years on the throne. That was a long time. He conquered a massive part of the Middle East, gaining territory from the legendary Euphrates River all the way down to Nubia. He embarked on at least 17 military campaigns, and his exploits are etched into the walls of the Karnak Temple. This guy wasn't messing around. Okay, but where does the Millennium Falcon come into play? I have to get back to the amulet itself, which is supposed to be in the shape of a scarab beetle. But look at this picture of it thanks to Clara Amit at the Israel Antiquities Authority. Then compare it to the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. Maybe it's a stretch, but some people think they look identical. Could the amulet have been modeled after an interstellar vessel that the Egyptians knew existed? Or was it just an ordinary scarab beetle? It is true that in ancient Egypt, scarabs were immensely popular. They represented the cycle of rebirth. The sun god Ra was closely associated with scarab beetles, sometimes depicted as having a beetle for a head. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Another supercomputer? Another shipwreck has been found near the island of Antikythera in Greece. Scientists are scrambling to get their researchers strapped into diving tanks and to the bottom of the Mediterranean. This news is blowing up everywhere. You've most likely heard of the Antikythera mechanism before. It's one of the most fascinating out-of-place artifacts ever found. What you might not know is that the mechanism, considered the first computer ever built, was recovered from a shipwreck. And now, in 2024, another shipwreck has been found less than 1,000 feet from the original. In June of this year, marine archaeologists with the Swiss Archaeological School in Greece went on an expedition. They were hoping to find more cargo that spilled from the original Antikythera shipwreck. The original was discovered around the year 1900. However, it took the next century for scientists to start bringing up most of its spilled cargo to the surface. It was during recovery missions that the Antikythera mechanism was found. More on that later. The Swiss archaeologists were looking through scraps of lost cargo from the first ship when they realized there were wooden remnants of another ship. Two ships right next to each other on the sea floor. The team also found human remains. According to the Greek Ministry of Culture, archaeologists found a pair of human teeth embedded in a compact mass containing traces of copper. What even is that? Archaeologists also found a giant marble head of Hercules with a beard, some iron nails, bits of copper, and random chunks of metal. So far, there has been no discovery of a second mechanism, but it could be somewhere in the debris field. Both ships could date to the same time, both built around 60 BC. If one of them had a mechanism, maybe the other one did too. It could be a matter of time before marine archaeologists find another supercomputer from the ancient world. The Antikythera mechanism is a mystery. Every time researchers think they've figured it out, it just gets weirder. They know it was built somewhere around the 1st century BC. It's a real analog computer, the oldest in human history. Scientists at the University of Glasgow recently used gravitational wave signals to study the 2,000-year-old computer. They believe the mechanism was used as a lunar calendar. It could predict the positions of the sun, the moon, the planets, as well as eclipses. Even if that's true, the object still seems out of time and place. It contains a series of intricate gears and dials, suggesting a level of mechanical engineering far ahead of its time. Given the technological limitations of the time, the Antikythera mechanism represents a leap forward in engineering and astronomy that is unprecedented in the historical record. Whoever made this device was definitely a genius. So what do you think? Could there be another ancient computer waiting to be found? And now for number 7. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Paper Girl for the super thanks. It really means a lot. Subscribe to join the Origins Explained family if you haven't already. Alien visitors in India. Archaeologists in India have found proof that aliens visited their country 10,000 years ago. It's nothing short of jaw-dropping. But is this proof for real, or is it all just a conspiracy? I'll give you the details and you be the judge. The discovery takes us to the villages of Chandeli and Gotitola in India. Experts identified a series of petroglyphs in these villages that depict strange humanoid figures. The glyphs are carved in rocks, human-like creatures gathered around an object that looks unmistakably like a spaceship. One of the researchers who took part in analyzing these new petroglyphs is J.R. Bhagat. According to him, the rock paintings are proof that people in the distant past either suspected the existence of space aliens or saw aliens for themselves with their own 2 eyes. After meeting, befriending, or bearing witness to aliens, the ancient people from prehistoric times memorialized the event in stone. The paintings are done in natural colors and are so well preserved that they've hardly faded at all. You can see clear as day that the figures are wearing strange suits, possibly spacesuits. One of them is holding what could be interpreted as a weapon, but it's unclear. Sure, you can say that prehistoric men and women had active imaginations. Maybe they drew space people for fun. But that doesn't fit with what scientists already know about prehistoric artists. When it comes to petroglyphs, ancient humans typically created things that they saw or experienced in their everyday lives. There is a reason why most petroglyphs are hunting scenes, images of animals and men with spears. Making petroglyphs of science fiction characters just doesn't fit with what scientists know about our ancient ancestors. The mystery of India's space aliens isn't only immortalized in stone, it's also immortalized in oral tradition. There is a legend you need to know about that brings this tale to a perfect close. The local people of Chandeli and Gotitola have been telling stories for years about tiny people who descended from the heavens. These small people took away some of the village inhabitants and never brought them back. Isn't that the most suspicious thing you've ever heard? Petroglyphs were found in a place where ancient people told stories about alien abductions, and the petroglyphs appear to be showing aliens. What do you think these humanoid pictures are? Gods or aliens? Or perhaps they're the same thing? Bat Creek Stone. I hope you like controversy because you're about to get a bucket full of it. There is a slab of stone in America that defies all logical explanations and gets people into screaming matches when they talk about it. Nobody can agree on whether the markings on the stone are examples of the ancient Cherokee alphabet or, well, let's just dive right into it. It's called the Bat Creek Stone, discovered by 2 men in 1889 in North Carolina. John W. Emmert and Cyrus Thomas were excavating an ancient Cherokee mound when they came across a cryptic stone. The stone was smooth, almost polished. Upon its surface were carved 8 unfamiliar characters. When Cyrus Thomas saw the characters, he was gobsmacked. He assumed the markings were letters from the Cherokee alphabet. His compadre agreed, and that was the end of the mystery. The stone was tucked away and forgotten for the next 70 years. The Bat Creek Stone should have been a globally important discovery. Archaeologists should have been crawling over one another to try and get their hands on the artifact. It was completely unique. Nothing else like it in the whole world. Why? because the Cherokee didn't have an alphabet. Fun fact, did you know that before colonization, over 300 languages were spoken across the United States by Native Americans? Native Americans left behind plenty of petroglyphs, but not nearly as many hints of a written language. The Bat Creek Stone should have been a big deal. Nobody started investigating it in earnest until the 1960s. That was when Joseph Mahan got his hands on the tablet. He was immediately confused because the letters didn't look like a lost Cherokee language. They looked like something altogether different. Joseph recognized them as Paleo-Hebrew letters. The scientific community freaked out. Interest in ancient history had increased a lot between 1889 and the 1960s. If what Joseph suggested was true, it meant Hebrews were in America thousands of years before the Spanish, the English, or the French. There is something I should mention. In 1809, a Cherokee man named Sequoyah began work on a writing system. It was thanks to him that the Cherokee language survives in the way it does today. It took Sequoyah 12 years, but he did complete the Cherokee syllabary. The story would make a great Netflix movie. Sequoyah was born in Tennessee into the Red Paint clan. He was given the English name of George Guess, even though he only spoke Cherokee. As an adult, he worked as a silversmith and blacksmith. Then, when the Creek War broke out in 1813, he served with the U.S. Army. That was when he saw people using the written word for the first time. After the war, Sequoyah was married and set about creating his writing system. He was so obsessed with getting his work done that his neighbors accused him of practicing witchcraft. His wife even tried to burn all of his papers. He finished in 1821 and got to work teaching the language to his first pupil. His first student was his young daughter, Ayoka. Now, back to the stone. In 1988, Professor J. Houston McCulloch confirmed that the letters on the Bat Creek Stone were indeed Hebrew. Ever since, people have been arguing about it. Some say the stone is fake, but why would some random guy fake a stone a century ago? The mystery lingers to this day. The stone was kept at the Museum of Natural History until 2001. Then it was loaned to a museum in Tennessee. In 2015, it was moved to the Museum of the Cherokee in North Carolina. But as of 2023, the stone appears to have vanished. Museum employees apparently won't talk about it, and they claim they've never even seen it. Why would an artifact like this suddenly disappear, and where did it go? Let me know any theories you might have in the comments. Graham Hancock has been cancelled. Graham Hancock has been cancelled. The host of Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix has cancelled his plans to film a new season in the US following incredible backlash. It has to do with Graham's alternative view on human history. Graham used to be a journalist, now famous for his controversial theories. The next season of Ancient Apocalypse was supposed to film at the Grand Canyon and at Chaco Canyon, for reasons I will be explaining shortly. But local tribal leaders were not happy, so the program backed down. They won't be filming in the American Southwest any longer. The tribal leaders were angry because, according to some native groups, Hancock's theories misrepresent their history and their culture. They are very upset with his theories involving the peopling of the Americas. Graham Hancock has suggested that an advanced civilization from the Ice Age lived in North America more than 10,000 years ago. This civilization had advanced knowledge when it came to mathematics and architecture. They mastered agriculture and animal husbandry. They were people from the Stone Age who were way more advanced than scientists say people in the Stone Age were. If Hancock's ideas are true, it means that every history textbook must be rewritten. Graham Hancock's theories claim the advanced civilization was wiped out by a flood, the same one talked about in the Bible. In an essay Graham wrote in 2000, he claimed prehistoric North America was inhabited by different ethnic groups. Not just Native Americans, but also Caucasians and Africans. This was all, according to Graham, based on his interpretation of ancient artifacts and ancient sites. He's investigated places like Gunung Padang in Indonesia and Nan Madol in Micronesia. He attributed the construction of both these amazing ruins to a civilization that existed 20,000 years ago. This is despite archaeological evidence pointing to them being built much more recently, within the last 1,000 years. When it comes to the American Southwest, the indigenous people are still living there and are fiercely protective of their history. as they should be. They've been through a lot to preserve it. Stuart Koyeyumthewa is a member of the Hopi Nation. He criticized Graham Hancock, saying that his people have lived in the Grand Canyon for more than 2,000 years. The Hopi still consider the Grand Canyon sacred. They felt disrespected by the idea of Hancock filming his series in their sacred place and pretty much making things up. Chaco Canyon is another sacred place, one of the places that may have been built by Graham Hancock's ancient society, but not according to scientists and not according to the local people. Chaco Canyon sits on the border of New Mexico and Colorado. Mainstream research has shown it was built by the ancestors of the modern Navajo and Pueblo peoples. They lived in Chaco Canyon from 850 until 1200 AD. The structure itself was sort of like an apartment building. It was 4 stories tall and contained hundreds of rooms for people to live and worship. Historians have always wondered how it was even built, considering there are no supplies nearby. It was pretty advanced engineering. To build Chaco Canyon, the ancient people would have needed to carry humongous wooden beams, some of them 16 feet long, into the canyon area on foot. They would have brought trees all the way down from the mountains just to build the citadel city in a barren place. Scientists recreated just how the native people must have done it by carrying the heavy logs on their heads themselves. To the Native Americans, it is part of their history and heritage, and it is offensive for someone like Graham to come in and claim that it was so advanced it must have been built by an older and smarter civilization that no one has ever heard of. So what do you think? Should Ancient Apocalypse be banned from filming in these areas? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Walls of Sakaiman. The Walls of Sakaiman are unbreakable. Constructed in the 15th century by the Inca, the walls of this ancient fortress have stood the test of time unlike any other structure known to humanity. If things keep going the way they are, these walls will still be here long after everything built by the Romans has turned to dust. That might sound like an exaggeration, but you should see these walls for yourself. The stonework is incredible. The huge stone blocks were cut so precisely it looks as if the Inca used lasers. They are huge, some of the blocks more than 12 feet tall. Many of the blocks weigh over 100 tons. That just doesn't seem possible, especially when you consider that Sakaiman was built on what is basically a marsh outside the Inca capital of Cusco. How do you move a 100-ton brick through a marsh using nothing but the power of sweaty biceps? I don't have an answer to that. Nobody does. But I can tell you about the history of Sakaiman and why it still baffles scientists. Historians know it was constructed during the reign of Emperor Pachacuti, who ruled the Inca from 1438 until 1471. The fortress was the biggest thing that the Inca ever built, period. Machu Picchu might be the most famous ruin, but it is not the biggest. Sakaiman is enormous, made as a fortified temple complex. When it was complete, the fortress was capable of holding at least 1,000 warriors. But here's the thing. The Inca didn't really need it because they never suffered invasions from their enemies. They were too strong to be invaded by their neighbors. The complex was a fortress, but was used mostly for religious purposes. It had a bunch of temples in it, most important being the temple of the sun god Inti. It was also used as a storage depot to keep things like textiles, metal tools, and weapons. The fortress was a critical strategic location when the Spanish arrived in 1532. After Francisco Pizarro orchestrated the murder of Inca ruler Atahualpa and took over Cusco, Pizarro sent his brother Juan to attack Sakaiman. The Spanish climbed over the walls and successfully took the fortress. The Spanish then used the fortress against the Inca counterattack. The great fortress worked against the people who built it. The Spanish used Sakaiman to maintain control over the Inca capital and its immediate area. In the years that followed, Sakaiman stones were removed and used to build colonial structures. Then the Spanish forgot it was even there. It was lost for centuries, rediscovered during an excavation in 1934. Sakaiman is still used today to reenact the ancient Inca celebration of Inti Raymi each year on the winter solstice. And the stones are still standing strong. They are resistant to earthquake damage, and each block interlocks with the ones touching it like a puzzle piece. The Inca didn't even need mortar to build their walls. How did they do it? We still don't know. The iron pot from 300 million years ago. In 1912, a man in Oklahoma found an object so out of the ordinary, so impossible that it couldn't exist. But it does. The object I'm talking about is an iron pot crafted by someone 300 million years ago. It's been hailed as proof that a civilization existed on this planet long before Homo sapiens even evolved. It's amazing that such a tiny artifact can have such massive implications. Frank Kennard was the man who found the iron pot. The Creation Evidence Museum has a copy of a letter that Frank wrote and signed to confirm what he found as real. The letter is dated November 27, 1948. Frank wrote that while he was working on the municipal electric plant in Thomas, Oklahoma, 36 years earlier, he came across a solid chunk of coal. The chunk was too big to be used, so he smashed it open with a sledgehammer. Upon the smashing, out came an iron pot. It was like cracking open an egg to find a little nugget of gold. The iron pot left an impression inside the block of coal like a mold. There was no doubt that the artifact had been locked inside the coal. In the official letter, Frank wrote that his fellow employee witnessed the whole thing from start to finish. Jim Stull saw the coal break and saw the pot fall out. That's 2 eyewitnesses confirming the pot to be legitimate. The amazing part is how old the coal is. Tracing its source, Frank learned the coal came from Wilburton, Oklahoma mines. It formed inside the planet 300 million years ago, if conventional geology is to be believed. Creationist Carl Bow claims the pot is proof that the world is not what it appears. Carl is a hardcore creationist, always looking for proof that the world is only around 10,000 years old. That's how old creationists think the world is, according to the Bible. Though the big question is, how did the pot get inside the coal? Did these things naturally happen, or was there a previous civilization of lizard people who made little iron pots hundreds of millions of years ago? Let me know your thoughts. What's the deal with this ancient rune stone? Something strange happened in North America that scientists don't want anyone to know about. First, I told you about Bat Creek Stone and its Hebrew letters, suggesting Jewish people were in North America thousands of years ago. Now, I must tell you about the Heavener Rune Stone. It's even stranger. The Heavener Rune Stone is covered in what look like Viking runes. The stone has been celebrated as proof that Vikings lived in the Great Plains. The Rune Stone is in Oklahoma, the last place you think of when thinking about Vikings. The stone is around 10 feet tall, a heavy slab of pure sandstone carved with a series of bizarre symbols. For more than 100 years, locals assumed the inscription was made by the Choctaw Native Americans. They even called it Indian rock. The rock wasn't that famous in the 19th century. Locals knew it was there, but nobody took much interest in it. It wasn't until Gloria Farley grew obsessed with the stone that it made national news. Gloria was from Heavener and grew up with the stone. She became fascinated by it as a child, and that fascination grew into a lifelong pursuit for the truth. She visited the site as a young girl in 1928. She returned as a woman in 1951 to solve its mysteries. Gloria set out to prove that the sandstone was inscribed by Vikings who lived in the Great Plains in the 11th century. The Smithsonian Institution even gave a helping hand. There isn't a more trusted name in science than the Smithsonian Institution of America. They identified the 8 carved symbols as being Scandinavian. They even translated them as follows: Nomedal. They interpreted the word as meaning sundial. Weird, right? It wasn't until 1986 when Dr. Richard Nielsen allegedly came up with a better interpretation. He translated the symbols as glomedal, trading the original N for an L. That changed the meaning of the word to Gloam's Valley. It appears the Vikings used this stone as a border sign like, "Welcome to Death Valley." It suggests the Vikings knew the lay of the land and had their own settlements in the region. But who was Gloam? A king? An explorer? Was he the one who settled the valley for the Vikings? The idea put forward by researchers in the 20th century was that the Norsemen sailed up the Arkansas River. The Vikings did it 500 years before Columbus went to America. When they arrived in the Great Plains, they established themselves there, building a new homeland for the Viking people. But then what? Did they just disappear without a trace? Considering there are no Viking ruins known about in the Great Plains, a lot of people are suspicious of the Heaven or Rune Stone. Until someone finds a battle axe, there will always be skeptics. Another theory is that the Rune Stone is fake. Some have speculated that it was carved by French explorers in the 17th century. But why would they do that? What would be the point of a French explorer carving Viking runes on a stone in the middle of nowhere? Any thoughts about this? A new Mythic Temple. The mystery of the ancient religion worshipping Mithras continues. What secret mystical knowledge did the cult of Mithra possess 2,000 years ago that is no longer in our mind? It's a question that archaeologists in Turkey are trying to answer. In southeast Turkey, researchers uncovered an underground temple used 1900 years ago by the Mithraic cult. It's about 8 miles from the famous Zervazan Castle, which served as a military outpost during the Roman Empire. Excavations started in this region in 2014. Over the last decade, scientists have revealed remnants of walls, a watchtower, a church, weapon depots, rock tombs, all kinds of amazing things left behind by the Romans. And now they have found a temple. Mithraism and Christianity were around at the same time. They both emerged in the 1st century AD, with Mithraism reaching peak popularity in the 3rd century AD. At the same time Christianity was growing, so was Mithraism. They had a relationship like Coke and Pepsi or McDonald's and Burger King, the two big religions of Rome competing for the most customers. As you know already, Christianity won. Mithraism was abolished in the 4th century AD. There are two huge differences between Christianity and Mithraism. Christianity has religious texts dating to its inception. There are dozens of Bibles across the world and hundreds of forbidden biblical books. If you want to know more about the forbidden books, be sure to subscribe because we do a lot of them pretty often. Christianity has all of these records, but Mithraism has nothing. The mystery cult was centered around the Persian god Mithras, a deity far older than Christ. Mithras was associated with light and justice. The religion was most popular with members of the Roman elite, with the wealthiest in society. What these people did as part of their religion is unknown. Did they have commandments? Were there special laws? Nobody knows because it was forbidden to write anything about the Mithraic secrets when we were in the cult. It truly was a secret society. It's a real letdown for modern historians because Mithraism is a blank spot in history. Archaeologists do have some ideas though. They have discovered so many buried temples from Turkey to England that they have been able to paint a vague picture of what the cultists were doing. The Mithraic worshippers were obsessed with an obscure legend of Mithras killing a bull in a cave. That's why they built their temples underground. These structures are known as Mithraeum, gloomy, mostly subterranean structures that added to the secrecy. Inside the underground temples, archaeologists have found artwork. Stone sculptures depicting the god Mithras being born from an egg. He rises naked from the lower eggshell. Other times, there are images showing him being born from a rock instead of an egg. The whole thing is weird now. Some think the Mithraic cult was the precursor to the Illuminati, and some believe that they possessed immense knowledge of the true state of the universe. The Bygong Pipes Mystery. There are two places in this world where you can find pipes so old that they have all but turned to stone. The first place is in China, within the caves of Mount Bygong. The second place is going to come as a shock. Let's go to China first, where there lies a phenomenon that has earned the attention of scientists and conspiracy theorists alike. That phenomenon is the Bygong pipes, curious formations embedded in ancient stone that look like sewage pipes. These things look exactly like the pipes in your house. According to a Chinese state media news site, the Bygong pipes have already been meticulously analyzed by scientists. Researchers were able to identify the chemical makeup of the pipes. They contain large amounts of iron oxide, silicon dioxide, and calcium oxide. Alright, nothing out of the ordinary there. But then scientists announced that they identified 8% of something unidentifiable, a material that scientists are clueless about. That undefinable content could be the secret ingredient used by whichever ancient civilization built the pipes to keep them solid for so long. Mainstream scientists say no way, Jose. Similar structures have been found in southern Louisiana and eastern Kentucky. Scientists say the mysterious structures aren't pipes at all, but rather fossilized trees. According to the geologists who studied the pipes in Louisiana, these cylinder-shaped structures were made when minerals formed around the roots of trees. Minerals attached themselves to the roots, and then the roots gradually rotted away on the inside. This left behind real pipes made from sediments. The same explanation has been given for the Baigong pipes in China. Other researchers have allegedly discovered that they contain the organic plant matter of the original trees. Do you think scientists have it right? Hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts of all of these controversies in the comments below. The Civilization of Agartha. Until very recently, people all over the world were convinced the Earth was hollow. People everywhere believed in a hollow Earth long after they had already agreed the Earth was round. The idea was that the surface world was nothing but an outer shell, and underneath that shell was a vast world with its own atmosphere, its own geological wonders, and its own civilization. This civilization was called Agartha, and it wasn't just a scientific theory, but an accepted fact. When the concept was proposed in the 17th century by scientist Edmund Halley, it caught on immediately. People began to believe the planet was made of multiple shells, with each one separated by its own individual atmosphere. Each shell supposedly worked independently of the other and had its own unique people and life forms. The theory of the hollow Earth was expanded upon for centuries. As recently as World War II, the Nazis allegedly searched for the entrance to the hollow world, believing the civilization of Agartha possessed technology that could help them win the war. German U-boat navigator Karl Unger even claimed that he saw the entrance himself and could confirm the Earth was indeed hollow. Sort of sadly, almost everything about Agartha these days is considered a conspiracy theory. Mainstream scientists say the Earth is a solid mass with a liquid molten core, while others believe that's totally false. Mount Shasta. In Northern California, there is a snow-capped volcano named Mount Shasta. It's at the very edge of the Cascade Mountain Range, which comes down in waves of rocky peaks from British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. But this volcano is unlike any of the mountains in the Pacific Northwest. It's filled with secrets that scientists can't, and perhaps will never understand. The mountain draws in about 26,000 visitors each year. The tourists flood the small town at the foot of the mountain and spend heaps of cash at crystal shops and bookstores. It's kind of a hub for those looking to gain a deeper appreciation for the planet and its energies. What really draws these tourists in is the rumor that hidden within the mountain volcano is a secret crystal city, one that the ancient Native Americans knew about before the Europeans came. There are also rumors that the volcano stands on one of the most powerful ley lines in the world, creating an energetic vortex that spiritualists can feed on. The mysterious crystal city is called Telos, and it was first described in 1864 by the zoologist Philip Sclater. He believed a continent called Lemuria sank beneath the Indian Ocean thousands of years ago. Then, after the continent sank, its 25,000 surviving souls fled to Mount Shasta. They then built a grand city in the heart of the mountain, like a group of dwarves, and allegedly, they continue to live there in total isolation. None of this has ever been confirmed by modern scientists, but the fact is, people still believe there is a society in the mountain, even if nobody can prove it. The Hanging Monastery. The Hanging Monastery of Mount Heng is a fascinating and peculiar place in China. The mountain itself is considered a powerful and sacred place, one of the 5 great mountains of China. The Hanging Monastery is a testimony to the ingenuity of the monks who lived here for centuries. It was built in 491 AD, constructed against a sheer wall of solid rock as if by a miracle, and it's still standing 1,500 years later. Because the monastery was built so long ago, No one knows exactly who started it. Legend has it a monk named Liao Ran began construction alone. Slowly but surely, more monks arrived on the mountain to help build, as they all wished to be isolated from the world in a place almost impossible to reach. The site was perfect for those who wanted to practice meditation. Because of its lofty height, noises from the ground couldn't be heard. In addition to the peace and quiet, its height ensured that the monastery was safe from floods. The mountain's peaks worked as a shelter to protect the monks from rain, snow, and the harsh sun. This is one of the main reasons for the monastery's continual existence over the years. But even though this place looks like it was built using magic, experts say it wasn't. Most likely, the monks used highly advanced engineering methods. They drilled holes into the rock, then slipped in wooden pillars. These wooden pillars acted as supports for the structure. However, there are myths that the pillars were installed later to give tourists a sense of safety, and that the monastery really is held against the wall as if by magic. India's giant jars. Researchers in India recently came across 4 separate fields covered in gigantic stone jars. All 4 of these mysterious sites were found in the state of Assam, with a total of 65 sandstone jars spread between them. Archaeologists haven't been able to date these relics yet, but believe they were made prior to 401 BC. That's over 2,400 years ago. The discovery was made during a 2020 survey of the area. The research team went into a remote part of the jungle that had yet to be formally surveyed, a place where no people live and where nobody had really gone before. It was as they searched through the jungle for anything interesting that they started finding random jars. The jars were found sticking up from the ground and completely overgrown with weeds and vines. Some of them are 10 feet tall and almost 7 feet wide. They also look very similar to the strange stone jars found in Laos and Indonesia. The only thing is that these sites in India are thousands of miles away from the ones in Southeast Asia. To make things even more bizarre, the team has already discovered decayed human remains inside several of the giant jars. This suggests they were used for burial rituals, although scientists don't know for sure. There are no written accounts of giant jars being used ceremoniously, so their presence in the jungle is still a mystery. And now for number 6, but first want to give a quick shout out to Chef Green Thumb and Ivy Merritt. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about mysterious discoveries and archaeology. Tito Bustillo Cave. The Tito Bustillo Cave is one of the most mystifying places in Spain. It was discovered in 1968 by a group of cavers equipped with nothing but spelunking gear. They dropped down into a cavern along the northern coast, just a few miles from other famous Spanish caves like Altamira and El Castillo. As they descended into the darkness of the subterranean pit, they quickly started to see paintings all over the walls. Even though these cavers weren't archaeologists, they knew immediately they had stumbled upon something ancient and great. We now know that the paintings in this cave are among the earliest examples of human art in Europe. The cave is 1,600 feet long, connected through passageways and large vaulted chambers, and it's filled with some of the first pieces of artwork ever created by human beings. Sure, there are older pieces of artwork in Spain from 65,000 years ago, but those were created by Neanderthals. After the Neanderthals were wiped out 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens were the only ones left to draw on cave walls. Our earliest attempts at art can be found right here in the Tito Bustillo Cave, with the paintings dating back 36,000 years. But there's still a lot that scientists don't understand about the cave and its paintings. The artwork depicts mostly animals, large numbers of deer and reindeer and horses, but there are also strange and unidentified animals, things nobody has ever been able to make sense of. There are mysterious geometric lines and patterns too, which are also kind of strange. We don't know if these early humans saw animals that no longer exist, or if they were making up creatures from their own imaginations. Crystal River. Florida's Crystal River Archaeological State Park is a place of great history and deep mysteries. It's considered one of the longest continually occupied places in Florida and served as a ceremonial center for Native Americans for nearly 2,000 years. The people who lived here were coastal dwellers. They settled the Crystal River about 10,000 years ago and lived in small bands of nomadic hunters and gatherers. Historians call these people Paleo-Indians. They traveled from place to place forever foraging and hunting. Typically, these groups were made of extended family members, brought together in a clan, and related almost entirely by blood. But then something strange happened. 8,000 years ago, the sea began to rise and the weather began to change. Mammoths and other Ice Age beasts started going extinct. At the same time, humans were rapidly undergoing technological advancements. Along the Crystal River, there was a civilization of fisherfolk starting 2,500 years ago. They lived there all year, but scientists aren't entirely sure what it was they were doing. Today, the site is covered in huge earthen mounds. These mounds were where the inhabitants conducted cultural festivals, ritual ceremonies, and where they buried their dead. There are roughly 1,500 skeletons scattered throughout the archaeological site. But here's the craziest part. Evidence has shown that people made pilgrimage to the Crystal River complex from all over America. Native Americans traveled immense distances specifically to bury their dead under these earthen mounds. It's been estimated that about 7,500 visitors arrived at the complex each year. Then, around the year 1500, everyone packed up and left, but scientists don't know why. The cave roads of Tuscany. The cave roads of Tuscany were left behind by the Etruscans 800 years before the birth of Christ, maybe even longer. The cave roads are mysterious pathways that were cut through hard stone using primitive hand tools, nearly a mile high in some places. The stone is a type of solidified ash from volcanic eruptions called tuff, so it was a little easier than just cutting through solid rock. Still, the Etruscans lived in central Italy 3,000 years ago, before the Roman Empire. It wasn't as if they had access to modern technology to tunnel through stone. This was an impressive feat of engineering, a building project that would have taken a lot of coordination and cooperation. Scientists have no doubt the Etruscans completed the project using primitive chisels and hammers. What they don't understand is why the Etruscans went through all the effort. They made these curving pathways all throughout Tuscany, spread like spiderwebs or ant tunnels. They go through the small Italian towns of Pitigliano, Sovana, and Sorano. Some of the roads contain their own shrines meant to protect travelers from evil spirits. There are even ancient tombs situated alongside some of the cave roads. But just what was the purpose of such a strange and enormous undertaking? There are a few different theories. Some say the roads could have been used as an escape in case of an invading army. Some say they were sacred ceremonial paths leading to religious sites. Others believe they were merely roads to connect settlements, making trade easier and keeping merchants safe from bandits. Mysterious Neolithic roundel. Archaeologists in the Czech Republic have just announced the discovery of an incredible Neolithic structure even older than Stonehenge. It's called a roundel, and it's 7,000 years old. Scientists are at a loss. They can't figure this place out because the purpose of the structure continues to elude them. According to researchers from the Institute of Archaeology of the Czech Academy of Sciences, roundels are the oldest evidence of architecture in Europe. There are 200 of them across the continent, with 35 in the Czech Republic. Even though scientists have studied so many of these prehistoric structures, they still don't understand their purpose. Let's focus on this newest discovery, which was constructed around 4,900 BC. In comparison, Stonehenge was built over 1,000 years later in 3,100 BC, and the Egyptian pyramids even later in 2,600 BC. It's believed the roundel structure was built by a group of early humans known as the stroked pottery culture. They were early farmers in Central Europe who reached their peak between 4900 and 4400 BC. The structure itself is 180 feet in diameter, with its walls about as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa before they were destroyed. The roundel was circular, almost like a huge open pit, but it was built at a time before tools. This is the Stone Age we're talking about, long before iron, when humans only had access to sharp stones and animal bones. Building such an enclosure with tall walls would have been impressive for the time. Researchers believe the roundel could have been an early trade center, or even a place where a prehistoric cult performed strange rites of passage and rituals. The Beehive tomb of Tyran. The ancient citadel of Tyran was a mystical place even 2,000 years ago. The Greeks believed the city was originally built by Proitos, the grandfather of legendary hero Perseus, and the supposed founder of the city of Mycenae. Proitos allegedly built the city in 1600 BC, long before it was deserted around the year 0 and the rise of Christianity. While the city has always been steeped in myth, there is one place in particular that scientists are still investigating. In 1913, a beehive-shaped structure known as a Tholos tomb was discovered here. It was found about half a mile underneath the citadel. The ancient tomb is about 10 feet wide and 42 feet long. It's amazing because the roof is steeply pitched and decorated to make it look just like a beehive. The mystery is that even though the tomb was found in perfect condition, there was nothing inside of it, at least nothing good. There were a few pot shards and a single stone altar with a square indentation. Nobody knows what the altar is for. No sarcophagi or corpses were ever found inside. And it was built about 3,400 years ago. Researchers believe the tomb was made for an ancient hero, but no one knows who that hero may have been. Wanga. The Wanga site in Australia is home to 15,000 pieces of rock art. They stretch across 400 feet of sandstone and were created over many thousands of years. What's truly strange about these particular pieces of art is that they tell a single cohesive story. Some of the petroglyphs here are in the form of animal tracks and geometric shapes, but mostly there are detailed engravings of the Seven Sisters, a group of 7 stars in the sky known as the Pleiades constellation. This is a baffling coincidence for archaeologists to try to understand. The Seven Sisters narrative is something that can be seen in many different cultures across the world. The Greeks had their own stories about the Seven Sisters, the 7 stars in the Pleiades constellation, and so did the Aboriginal Australians on the other side of the world. This is bizarre because 2 cultures that never met came up with the same stories. The Wanga site is filled with petroglyphs, with most designs being 5,000 years old. We can see how the 7 sisters are chased across the sky by the man who was in love with them. Researchers still have no idea how the Australians and the Greeks, among other ancient cultures, all came up with almost identical stories. Thanks for watching! What are your thoughts on the shocking rock art of Wanga? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!